So, guys, welcome to the first Web Warrior Protocols hosted podcast. I am joined today by John.
Good afternoon.
And we also have a special guest for our first ever episode. We have Big Ron himself.
Evening.
And today we're just going to be talking about a few different things, mainly the things that have happened over the weekend at the York Weekender event. Speaking of which, we have a new King of the Inhumans. Ron, you managed to take the entire event using Inhumans. You managed to put me out of commission in round 4 and then go on to win the whole thing. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Just quickly, because I know everyone out there is wondering, what was in your roster character-wise?
So obviously the core Inhumans, Black Bolt, Medusa, Lockjaw, Crystal. I also took Beast, Miss Marvel. I took Captain Sam, Ulik, Pyro, and Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah, so a very interesting mix of characters. I'm pretty sure, I don't know about the other players at the event, and I don't know about you, John, but I wasn't quite sure what I was looking at when I first saw that roster.
Yeah, I think it's the addition of like Rocket Raccoon and Ulik in there. I can see how they fit, but they kind of throw you off when you look at it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with today's episode's title, it sums it up really, because when I first saw Ulik, I didn't think he was a super powerful character. Kind of thought he sucked a bit. But it turns out that Ulik, you suck, but Ron does not give up. And that sums it up for me, really. So, did you use Ulik in every game, Ron?
I used him in 5 out of the 6.
And did he perform as a 5 threat in every game is the real question.
No. In my second game versus Martin Bray's Web Warriors, he put 6 attacks into a Toad and did 3 damage. But in my first game, and very much so the final, he was an absolute god.
When you say he was a god, what exactly is it that he does? We know he's a bit of a tank. You were using the Rock and Troll tactics card with him, weren't you?
I was, yes. So the basic idea is turn 1, you either rock and troll or you crush and leap onto one of their problem pieces. So I played against Web Warriors 4 times, so it will mainly hit Gwen, try and get her out of commission as fast as possible.
Yeah, and it definitely worked for you. With Rock and Troll in our game, it was pretty brutal to see, as the range 5 place is just ridiculous. But I think this is where we come back to the Inhumans, as they're the key to getting Ulik online and making sure he can always do his charge followed by a place type attack.
Yep, 100%.
As he gets a 2-power base, but then their leadership just lets you give him that third one every turn whenever you need to. And it really opens up a lot of options. Another thing I didn't realise when I first looked at Ulik's card is just how powerful that size 4 throw is. We know huge throws like that are massive, but thanks to his manoeuvrability, he can quite easily get into a position where he can make the use of that.
Yep, 100%.
And in terms of the other characters in your roster, did you use much of Rocket?
I used Rocket in 2 of my games. I used Captain Sam in 1. I didn't use Pyro at all. I kind of put Pyro in there as like a red herring, so I had a free character slot and a free tactics card slot, so I figured a lot of people's going to be running Pyro and Pyrotechnic, so I kind of threw them in there just to throw people off a little bit.
Yeah, 100%, just going for a bit of a bluff. John, sadly, you weren't able to make the Weekender, but how would you have responded to seeing that across the table?
I'm not going to lie. I love playing Ron. He knows this. We always have great games. I would have probably thought this was the time my luck was in when I drew Ron and I looked across the table at that roster. I would have probably thought this might be the easiest game I've got with Ron. Turns out, having seen some of the results and the games and things, I would have been horrifically wrong.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a shock to the system. I think for everyone that played it, myself included. Ron, we had a super close game. It came down to me not being able to kill Ulik, and then Ulik just went on another one of his rampages, KOing Miles, and I think pushing Jess off of an objective.
Yep, that's right.
Which was just absolutely brutal. But it was an amazing game. How did it go in the finals? As I know we've not had a massive chance to discuss that ourselves.
Well, anytime you're playing humans, it's going to be a fairly difficult game just because you have to pay Black Bolt tax to get his leadership.
Yeah.
And obviously everyone looks at Black Bolt and they think, I will not daze that character whatsoever. And that tends to be what happens. But in the final, I got very spiky very early, and it kind of skewed it in that way. But well, I wouldn't say skewed. It was more I had like a really good round one with dice spikes, and it still came down to my opponent Angus could have potentially won. Just because he had a solid roster overall.
Because Angus was another Web Warriors player, which he seemed to have almost played all of them at the event.
Yep, I managed to play 4 Web Warriors and 2 Guardians.
So not much diversity there in terms of matchups, but do you feel going into those games that the Inhumans actually are quite a good counter? Obviously, the Web Warriors have a lot of control and the Guardians bring a lot of energy to the table.
Absolutely not. I don't think Inhumans have any... I don't think Inhumans have any good matchups, really, purely for the fact that you have to take Black Bolt. Like, I love Black Bolt as a character, and he always does work for me. But people tend to ignore him. That's why I tend to run Sacrifice, or I try and give him some sort of extract, so it kind of forces my opponent to focus him somewhat.
For sure, in our game, I remember I did an attack into one of your characters and you sacrificed onto Black Bolt. Luckily for me, however, I didn't get any damage through as he was just rolling absolutely red hot. But once he was on his injured side, I think it's worth taking a moment to mention his Whisper attack, which is absolutely devastating, and the main reason people try and keep Black Bolt in a good mood and not saying anything.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's still probably the best spender in the game overall. I don't think anyone can match 6 power, beam 4, 9 dice energy that stuns and staggers. It's just, if you can line it up right, it's game winning.
Absolutely insane attack. In our game, I believe he KO'd Mystique, left Moon Knight on 1 health, and then he took Moon Knight out with his builder, which was just brutal and really swung around the turn. And put me sort of from being ahead to trying to claw back up, and eventually wasn't able to. Super interesting to see. I think the main question, though, Ron, a lot of people want to know is why on earth did you decide to take Inhumans? It's clearly worked out for you, but I don't know about you, John. It wouldn't be my first choice for a roster when going to an event.
No, they wouldn't be anywhere near the top list for my choice either, to be honest with you. They feel like they're missing a lot of pieces. But clearly, Ron's proven there are ways to get them to work.
Sure, definitely. So, Ron, why did you decide to go with them in the end?
Well, anyone that knows me personally or knows me as a player knows that I cannot stand playing anything meta. It's just not who I am. So, because I own every model and I painted every model, I said to myself when I first started MCP, if this was the route that I was going to play everything. So, I've slowly been working my way through all the affiliations. And I don't know, there's just something about Inhumans for me. Like, I love Black Bolt as a character, I love Medusa. They have the bestest boy, even though he really doesn't have a spot for the Inhumans anymore with the crisis changes. But I don't know, I just think... I don't think anyone expected Inhumans. That was the main thing. I knew there were going to be a lot of Web Warriors, a lot of Guardians, a lot of Brotherhood, a lot of X-Men. And I just thought, like, in my practice games... I've been doing quite well with Inhumans, and yeah, I just thought, let's go with it.
For sure, and I think it's worth taking a moment just to shout out the guys, Mike, Gavin, Brett, and everyone else that helped put on the York weekend. It was an absolutely amazing event. I think we had almost all of the top players from across the country. We had yourself, we had Pat, Rich from Rich Mid Gaming, Quinn, I suppose. If you count Quinn, you know, we had a really top scene of players.
Yeah, for sure. Like 20 of the guys from London came up. They're all top players. I had the privilege of playing 2 of them. So yeah, it was the best event I've been to so far. Not in terms of competitiveness and like the games that I played, but just the overall atmosphere and the way it ran. It was just clockwork.
Yeah, definitely. There didn't seem to be any issues at all. Any stop starting, it just flowed nicely. The event went smoothly, everyone got the games in, and then around that, the social aspect of it was amazing as well. Just to touch briefly on the competitiveness of the event, as there's been a bit of controversy regarding that. John, I don't know if you're in on this or aware, but it seems to be a hot topic for sure. I don't know about you, Ron, but not a single one of my games felt like an easy win. Every game definitely had put some thinking into it and had to have a really hard time winning some of them. And then again, we had our super close game. I managed to go 5-1. The rest of them super hard opponents, even with a web mirror match at the end with Connor.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think you can take away the competitiveness of any event really, but especially this one, because you can go down the whole of the 64 players. Yes, a lot of the players are still fairly new to MCP, but these players are like hardcore ex-War Machine players. So, they know what they're doing, like...
They might be new to MCP, but they're definitely not new to Wargaming, all the competitive aspect of it.
No, not at all. So, another shout out to Martin Bray. I played him in my second game. I've known Martin Bray for years. He taught me War Machine initially, many years ago, and he's been playing MCP now for, I want to say, 5-6 months, and he was a very difficult opponent. Like, just because I know his background, I know he was a very good War Machine player. Like, he was a very hard matchup for me.
A lot of the sort of skills and the knowledge and the understanding of the mechanics of the games are applicable and can be carried over from different systems. I never really played War Machine myself, the same with Guild Ball. I know there's a lot of players from both communities that have sort of made their way over onto the MCP scene, which is, totally great to see. But it really does, in a way, give them an upper hand and give them a start to the race with a little bit of an advantage as they just sort of understand the plan and the gist of things going straight into the game.
Yeah, for sure.
John, you weren't able to make the weekend, as we mentioned. However, I'm intrigued. If you could have come, John, what roster would you have been bringing and what matchups would you have been looking forward to the least?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't make it. Weekenders are always difficult for me. It's a shame because it looked great from everything I saw and all the feedback I've had. In terms of rosters, I don't know is my honest answer. I'm currently stuck between making a choice between trying Brotherhood, just because I've been enjoying Pyro and Blob since they released, or sticking with Weapon X that I've run a little bit recently, just because, let's be honest, it gives me more mutants. It lets me put a bunch of mutants on the tabletop. And it's kind of the first time I've played mutants where really I get to roll a ton of dice and watch a load of pierces and a load of damage go out. I'd have probably stuck with Weapon X, to be perfectly honest. I'm really loving New Sabretooth. New Wolverine is great. We all know X-23 is a ton of fun for whoever's playing her, but maybe not always the opponent on the tabletop. Matchups, I've got to say, with the amount of Web Warriors it sounds like there was there, running Weapon X into Web Warriors is never fun. I know I've got some attack placements, but I've got no real control in the core Weapon X characters. So playing a team that has tons of control is always problematic.
Definitely. I think they can really cause a lot of issues. As a Web Warrior player myself, the main thing I want to do is disrupt everything that the opponent is trying to do. So if you haven't got the kind of team that can deal with that, it can be super difficult. Speaking of Brotherhood, we had Pat from across the Bifrost who came in at third at the event. Ron, I don't think you played him. I didn't actually play him during the event either. However, I did get absolutely smashed by him on the Saturday night in a game that we recorded, so that will be up soon. And I think it's really interesting to see sort of the takeover of Brotherhood. I know in sort of the US scene, they're becoming quite dominant, but you could see that reflected a little bit with the York Weekender, as there were quite a few players dotted around the event. And I think there were definitely some Senator shenanigans, Ron. I know you already knew about them, but I definitely wasn't aware of them.
Yeah, the Mystique Senator play is it's pretty rough to deal with.
Yeah, so I learned firsthand when playing against Pat. I won't go into too much detail, but you go from the normal, I'll take my objectives, they take theirs, and we'll fight over one or two of them, to, oh my god, the Brotherhood have taken my objectives and they're now picking theirs up as well. It's absolutely brutal. It's not something I saw coming. So it's going to be really interesting to see and explore that when we get the video edited.
Please tell me that's dropping soon. I really want to see your face on there as that happens to you.
Luckily, my face was completely off camera, but I was definitely in shock and not quite sure what to do in that matchup. So big shout out to Pat, an absolute gent as always to play against. One of the best players around. And if you ever get the chance to play him, don't be put off by the whole unbeatable Pat thing, as it's always a pleasure no matter the outcome of the game. Just want to quickly talk about Web Warriors going into the event. So looking at all of the different teams, I didn't really think there was anything I was too concerned about playing against in terms of matchup. The Web Warriors mirror match is always a little bit funky, as priority matters a lot more there than it does in some other games. Brotherhood, I was fairly confident going into. Not so much now that I know about the Senator's plan, but at least now I know about it, I can maybe deal with it. But Ron, once again, it was the Inhumans that managed to deflate my balloon and take down the webheads. So at the start of our game, just quickly run through it. I believe you won priority. We ended up on your secures.
Yes, there is no way I am ever letting a web warrior take secures because majority of them all play Ds, and that's really not good for what I wanted to do.
No, not at all, as it really can spread you out into quite an uncomfortable position for the rest of your team and what they want to do. Interestingly, just to take a look at the two other Web Warrior players that placed in the top 8. First of all, we've got Connor, who I played in the last round of the event, and his secures were really strange, at least in my opinion. He took Superpowered Scoundrels, Infinity Formula, and Riot Sparks. So Riot Sparks I completely understand. Infinity Formula is a little too risky for me. I get the idea of wanting to give the webheads power, but I don't know about you, John. Superpowered Scoundrels just does not seem a great scenario for the webheads going in, as a lot of other teams that are already wanting to do an attrition style play can really, really get the most out of that cover and really punish the webheads.
Yeah, Superpowered Scoundrels is an odd one for me. I mean, I loved it when I ran Criminal Syndicate. I'm not against it with Weapon X because I want to be plonking around. Cover's not that big for me. But I think as a webhead, wanting to move people off and play the kind of control game, it doesn't really suit. I mean, you're on minimal dice most of the time when you're attacking, if you're trying to anyway. And the cover bonus is just going to really minimize the amount of damage you're trying to chip through, alongside there are a lot of points for you to try and control. It's an odd one.
Yeah, definitely. His extracts as well. He had both Spider Infected and Struggle for the Cube. And the general impression that I got from Connor as a player was mainly that he wanted to play the game fast and hard. So I'd imagine the logic behind taking Superpowered Scoundrels was because there were so many points on the board, he could hopefully gain a huge advantage, outscore his opponent quick. However, for me, it's absolute madness, the idea of going in with those 5 points on the board extracts and secures. So it's super interesting to see. Angus is the other webhead player. Ron, you played him. He, more like myself, took the triple D secures. For his extracts, though, he took hammers, and again, the two Struggle for the Cube and Spider Infected. So in your game, Ron, who was it that won priority?
Angus won priority in our game.
So I'm assuming he took his secures.
He took his extracts, which I was extremely shocked about.
Okay, so what did you end up playing?
So we ended up playing Struggle for the Cube, which was his extract, and my secure, which was Intrusions.
No, so definitely a interesting combination of missions that you don't get to see very often. Just to quickly run through Angus's list, as it is Web Warriors, but it's very different to mine and Connor's in the sense that it's also got Red Skull, the Master of Hydra, in there. It's got Baron Zemo and Winter Soldier. And then it's also got the new Agent Venom. And from what I've heard, he was playing much more of a gunline style list.
Yeah, so in our game, we played 17th Threat, and he put down Miles, Moon Knight, and then it was Winter Soldier, Red Skull 2, and Baron Zemo. So I potentially could have played into Hydra, led by Red Skull, but he ultimately decided to go with the Miles leadership.
Yeah, I think the Miles leadership is very powerful, and being able to manipulate the skulls once you're on or holding objectives with the Baron Zemo rerolls, as well as the fact that Red Skull's already quite a unit himself, so those defensive rerolls really help him out. I'm not sure how you found it, but I don't think it is a fun matchup to go into, in the sense that things are going to be very unorthodox and very hard to deal with.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing, but I got rather lucky with my round 1, like I've said previously, with the fact that I was able to daze Red Skull to round 1, retain priority and KO him at the start of round 2. So I was already 5 threat up.
Yeah, that must have been absolutely brutal. So how was it that you actually managed to get that off?
Well, credit to Angus, he played very smart. Like, he knew what I wanted to do with Ulik, so he did an eyes on the prize play, grabbed 2 cubes of Red Skull and like pulled him back to his deployment zone. So the leap in charge, the crushing leap was never in range, and he left himself just outside of range of Rock and Troll. So doing inhuman shenanigans, I moved some power around, royal decreed Ulik up with Medusa to put him in Rock and Troll range. Ulik dropped in and just absolutely smashed him to pieces.
Yeah, and I think just going full circle and coming back around to Ulik, he's definitely not somebody that people saw coming. The range 5 place is insane, but it seems lately we've had much more dominance from the big beefy boys on the table. So, John, you weren't there, but it seemed that Rhino and Lizard were absolutely everywhere. Quite a few people had managed to get Ulik painted up. Not as many Crim Syndicate players as I've expected, but lots of big beefy tall lists walking around.
Yeah, that seems to be the way it's shifting at the minute. And there is a lot of Rhino. The last event I was at, there was a lot of Rhino. Not a lot of players, but a lot of Rhino. Lizard's always been about. He's always been a really good splash. I think his threat value plus his ability to just soak up damage and stuff is great. I think we might start seeing a lot of Rhino and Ulik combos moving forward as well to create those tall lists and keep the tall lists going. But that could be entertaining to see how it plays out.
For sure. In a couple of the games that I played over the weekend, including those outside of the event itself, in sort of the mini events and just the casual games at 5 o'clock in the morning, the really, really tough characters were just brutal. I played against one of the event organisers at 5 o'clock Sunday morning because, sleep is for the week and whatnot. And he had Dark Dimension. He took Dormammu, Ulik, and Heimdall. And Ulik, with that extra power and those rerolls from Heimdall, is an absolute pain to shift. He was just on 1 health for the longest time, just couldn't get rid of him, and I eventually did. But it was so much invested into doing so, and he'd been doing so much work during it. The fact that Ulik Spender can activate somebody is just so ridiculously powerful.
Yeah, I think he's going to find a place in a lot of lists moving forward.
For sure. Ron, did you come up against any of the other new characters over the course of the weekend? And by those, I mean Beta Ray Bill, Agent Venom, and Spider-Woman.
So I had to play against Spider-Woman in 3 games. Game 1, Game 2, and then Game 4 against yourself, all Web Warrior players. And then my 3rd game, I played against Ollie, who is a Guardians of the Galaxy player, and he took both Agent Venom and Beta Ray Bill.
Nice. So quickly, let's talk about Spider-Woman first, as you played quite a few games against her, as you said, including the one with myself. I found her to be really, really useful. What did you think as an opponent playing against her?
She is extremely difficult to deal with. It's Miles 2.0. I think the biggest thing about her is, she has stealth and she counts blanks, but the fact that she applies conditions before damage is dealt on her builder is insane. You get a spiky dice roll, you put stun on, they gain 1 power, you've done a ton of damage. It's just horrible to deal with. Yeah,
I was just about to say, John, I don't know if you and I have discussed this, but the stun before damage a couple of times came in where I had a big attack roll that dazed somebody. And 9 times out of 10 in this situation, you go, it doesn't matter about the triggers that have been dazed. But actually, that stun before damage is absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, we don't see stun before damage very often, and it's probably a good thing because when it does happen, it feels really bad. Like you just said, usually you get dazed and you're like, it's okay, because when I come back, I'm going to have some power and I can do something. But getting stunned and spiked out for a daze in a single attack and generating 1 power is just bad. Just really bad.
For sure. I did an interview over the weekend with Epic Flail. So they're a YouTube channel. I will tag them and you can check those guys out. And one of the things we didn't get a chance to mention about why MCP is so good is that rubber band mechanic. So you take a bit of a beating, but then you sort of bounce back with the power that you've now gained. And Spider-Man is uniquely good at shutting this down and exploiting your day's characters by interrogating them and really punishing you and sort of taking away from that bounce back mechanic.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the things people need to try and find a way to work around when she's on the tabletop. Is do you feed her something that you're not too worried about and hope your opponent bites for it, or do you just try and get her gone fast? I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting one to kind of play that little mini game with when Spider-Woman appears.
Definitely, but alas, Ron, I don't know about you, but in my games, she was super resilient because of that 4 physical defense and the counting blanks within 2. And as I was taking her in Web Warriors, that reroll meant she almost felt as tanky as Black Panther at times.
Yeah, so when it came down to the end of our game, I had an injured Rocket, an injured Black Bolt, an injured Medusa, and an injured Ulik facing off against a still healthy Spider-Woman. I'd managed to daze and KO every other character, but she just would not go down. Her mobility is crazy. Yeah, it's like Miles and Black Cat rolled into one. She's just great.
How did you find running Spider-Woman the weekend?
So it's quite interesting, as Ron said, it does feel like she is Black Cat and Miles sort of rolled into one cute little package. She's really, really useful. I found myself really playing to get that extra point from Interrogate, and a couple of times I think I overcommitted to it and it actually backfired a little. But overall, it's a great mechanic. It's so interesting to see a superpower that's been in the game for absolutely ages suddenly become so useful just based on the fact that it's on a different character that's a little bit more viable in a competitive scene. So it was really, really interesting to use her for that. I always had Black Panther in my roster for a while as a long move tanky character, and I didn't use him at any point over the weekend because I thought, well, I might as well take Spider-Woman as she fills a very similar role and is affiliated.
Okay, that's an interesting comparison that you swapped Black Panther out almost directly for Spider-Woman. I was going to say, we know the work Black Panther can do, so switching one out directly for the other one must be high praise for Spider-Woman.
Yes, for sure. I had both in my roster, but at no point did I take Panther. In every opportunity where I needed a character to fill a similar role, it was just Spider-Woman for me. The fact she brings some much needed energy attacks to the table to sort of diverse what the Web Warriors were able to put out is really useful. And on that all-webbed upturn, characters like Juggernaut or anyone with a slightly weaker energy defense really need to look out. As she's suddenly got a 7 dice energy builder that gives out conditions. It's absolutely insane.
That sounds like a promising move forward.
For sure. So, Ron, you played against Agent Venom and you played against Beta Ray Bill. Do you have anything notable to say about either characters? I know Beta Ray Bill's got a lot of talk at the minute, as has Agent Venom, but I think Beta Ray Bill's the one that everyone's looking at going, wow, this is what 4 could have been.
Yeah, so I've played against a lot of Beta Ray Bill recently in my practice games because Quinn just threw him in everything, and I tend to play Quinn a lot. So I was kind of worried about going up against him because I know what he can do. But it was the first time I had to play against him in Guardians, and he didn't feel as consistent as I thought he would compared to what Agent Venom feels like in Guardians. Like round 2, my opponent used a foreign assignment, and it was just incredible having a 2-power full auto, putting a load of conditions on me, getting thrown. Yeah, he feels great. I just don't think Bill fits the way that Guardians play as well as he should. Whereas in Asgard, he completely fills that role.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting to hear. The Guardians are generally either going really wide or all around one character like Thanos. So I think at times it can be hard to fit in a 4-threat character. Gamora is already phenomenal, so he's got to contest with her in that sense. But he definitely does bring some unique things to the table. My main thing for him is that he's not extremely maneuverable, so you can struggle with that a little bit. But some of the new Crisis cards really lean themselves to that clumped up sort of cluster in the middle of the board anyway.
Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of where he sits in Guardians. Is he wants to be in maybe that little bit more of a melee area where some of the other Guardians want to try and avoid it. So it might be useful for those kinds of scenarios to get him in there.
Definitely. So that's pretty much everything about the characters that we want to run through today. Just want to go back to saying a huge thank you to all of the organisers at the event, and also want to give a shout out to a couple of players. So, Ron, I don't know about yourself, but it was great seeing some players that we don't normally see coming along to these big events, joining in for the weekend, getting involved with the social and the games just as much. So, for me, Jon, Naylor, and Dharma both absolutely seem to be having the time of their lives, really enjoyed the event. I think Jon actually managed to go 4-2 with Spider Foes, which is pretty impressive. And then Dharma, off the top of my head, I can't really remember what he was playing because there was just that many affiliations. I think he bought
He went
A4.
3-3 with A-Force.
Yeah, I'm just having a look now. So it looks like he went 2-4 with A-Force.
Oh, okay.
They were the only affiliation he had with him, though, so fair play. I don't actually remember seeing any other A-Force players, which is quite funny, as until recently, they seem to be a very good counter to the sort of current meta, which was a lot of Malekith.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I've said it to everyone I've spoke to when they've asked me like how to deal with Malekith, like pre-nerf Malekith, and I just used to tell them just take She-Hulk, superior weight training, size 4, just smash him, gives him slow, use a spender, give him stagger, throw him away, usual Hulk shenanigans.
Yeah, definitely. She really, really is a good counter to these big characters. I think with more characters like Rhino knocking around, as we've said, she could be devastating as just being able to add all of those dice for such little power to an attack can really get around the fact that they're so survivable and get them off the table a lot quicker. Looking at the affiliation breakdown, there was only Dharma playing A-Force. Then if we move on to Asgardians, there were 2 players. We had 5 people playing Avengers. We had 12 people playing Brotherhood of Mutants, which is the most represented affiliation at the event. Then we had a couple of Cabal players, 3 people playing Convocation, 5 Crimson players, which is pretty interesting. Only 1 Dark Dimension player, as I don't think Dan Humpage was there, was he, sadly, and he would normally be bringing the big bad Dormammu himself. Then after that, we've got 10 games of Guardians of the Galaxy, 3 with Hydra, 2 with the Inhumans. So, Ron, that's you, and I'm not sure who else it was. I think it is Kieran who came, went 1-5 in the event. So, really shows that Inhumans can definitely perform well if you've got the experience playing them. I'm not sure whether Kieran's used them a lot before. He also had Avengers in his roster, so he might have actually been running those. But Ron, definitely interesting to see that both Inhuman players were so far apart in terms of rankings. Then after that, we had 1 Midnight Sun player, 2 Shield players, 7 Spider Foes players, and 2 Wakandan players. And then the last few, I promise I'll stop soon, we've got 5 Weapon X, 6 Web Warriors, 1 Winter Guard, 6 X-Men, and 2 people that put down themselves as being able to play unaffiliated. However, according to the stats, there weren't actually any games played as unaffiliated. John, I don't know whether I bored you to death there, but there were 4 affiliations that weren't represented at all. Can you guess what any of those are?
All that weren't represented, hang on. So we had a single Wakandan, from what I can remember.
Yeah, we had 2 Wakandans.
2 Wakandans. We had a single Winter Guard.
Yep.
We had a Dark Dimension.
Just think about stuff that I normally play, John, and you'll get there.
This is what I'm looking at. There's also a Shield. We've got 2 Inhumans. We've got 1 A-Force. We've got Crimson. Oh, we got. Did we have Hydra?
We did. I'll give you a hint, John. Before Ron was known as the King of the Inhumans, he may also have been known as the Sorcerer Supreme.
Oh, there were no defenders.
No, so unsurprisingly, there were no defenders players. They're not in the best place at the minute. And without Ron sort of championing them, it turns out there was no one that brought them along. Interestingly, we also had no Sentinel players at all, which is really surprising because they seem to be a hugely popular release. They were completely different to every other affiliation in the sense you could double up on the Mark IV Sentinel, I believe it is.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'd entirely forgot they were even their own thing, just.
Yeah, it's kind of bonkers, really, considering how recent they come out. They're something that seemed to have a huge impact and then just faded quickly away. There are also two more affiliations, John. There's X-Force. So Dan Hughes will be disappointed with that one, that nobody brought along Cable and Friends for the day. However, I think with Weapon X now being a thing in Shadowlands Daredevil, it is very hard to justify their leadership. And then lastly,
Definitely.
John, can you guess which the final one is the most surprising to not see at all?
Oh, I'm on the spot now. You're going to have to break it to me. My brain's going to pop trying to run through this list otherwise. Go on.
So, although there were lots of Thanos in various other lists,
Oh, no actual Black Order.
not a single player that put themselves as able to be playing Black Order, which is quite mind-blowing considering that they've gone through phases of being super, super popular and considered super strong in the meta. But at this 64-player event, there wasn't a single person bringing them along.
I think they've kind of taken that drop off recently, though. Thanos has become a thing, but Thanos is a thing when he's splashed into other rosters, like Guardians, for example.
For sure.
But taking Black Order as Black Order doesn't seem to have happened at a number of events for quite a while now, and I'm not really sure why.
I think for me, at least, the main reason is the fact that you want to have the reality gem on Corvus and you want to have the other restricted gem on Thanos, which really limits you in terms of what tactics cards you can have and how you can build a roster overall. So I think maybe that might be akin to why they've fallen off a little bit. Ron, I'm not sure if you'd agree there.
I think the biggest problem with Black Order is, one is definitely the restricted gems, but also you never take Corvus without reality, and I think most Thanos players want Thanos with reality space. That seems to be the current flavour that is being run at. I know before the restricted gem changes, a lot of people were running Space Mind and just use them as a pure control piece, but with the restricted changes coming in and how much threat you actually put into Thanos, him having the reality just completely makes him almost unkillable. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's extremely brutal. With that damage reduction down to 0, counting a skull in your defense rolls as a crit can just mean certain characters, such as your Moon Knights and your Mystiques and your Bookies, just bounce off of Thanos, and he's just completely inevitable in the sense that he will not go down. John, I don't know if you've had that experience, but sometimes going up against a Thanos with the reality gem just feels completely deflating, as he just seems to shrug off all but the most grievous of wounds.
Yeah, I ran Shadowlands Daredevil and came across him, so I'd got like Hood and Bucky and a bunch of rapid fire into it, and it was just pointless. Turn after turn, I was having to put something into him to try and deal with him, and it was just like you knew you were just wasting actions, you knew you were wasting activations, but something had got to be done about it. It was just utterly horrific.
For sure. Very, very hard to deal with. Quite interestingly, when we do the YouTube videos, I find myself saying "so John" quite a lot, and it seems that for the podcast, all I'm saying is "for sure," which is just my way of agreeing and sort of echoing what everyone else is saying. So, for the rest of the year, we've got plenty of other events coming up. We've got the big Spring into Marvel event. I just wanted to quickly touch on the Infinity series. So, for those who might not know, the Infinity series is something that is being run by Web Warrior Protocols, and a bunch of other TOs have sort of joined the Infinity series cause as such. So we are running 6 events across the country throughout the year where you can come along, throw some dice, play some MCP, and we're currently looking at potentially having an event at the end where we stream a couple of the top tables and have invitations sent out to all of the people that placed in the top 3 or 4 at each event, as well as having another event alongside it so that everyone can come along and roll some dice. Ron, you're going to be running one of them down at Sanctuary Games. I can't remember the date off the top of my head. However, the first event in the series is next month on March the 11th. John, Ron, I'm hoping both of you guys will be able to make it down.
Yep, I'll be there 100%.
I am going to do everything I can to get myself there.
Amazing. So If you haven't already, there is a Facebook page for the first event in the series. Just to quickly run through the other TLs and the venues, we've got Tony Moore, who's running his event at Element Games. We've got Norbert, who comes from Bad Moon Cafe in London, so he'll be running his there with Pat and all those guys. Then we have Amph, who is running an event, at Pro Tech Games, who really helped out with the York weekend, as you can check them out. Then Ron, yourself at Sanctuary, albeit boarding Brum. And then lastly, Marcus is running one at Curtain Games. So a huge spread of variety, a huge amount of travelling if you want to try and complete the gauntlet, but it's definitely doable. We'll be returning again next year. However, for now, each of the gems is ready to be collected, and we'll be kicking it off, as I said, on March the 11th. So I think that is pretty much everything for our first episode. We've dodged all the controversy and all the arguing and steered way clear of that. Ron, as we said in the title of the video, Ulik, you suck, but Ron does not seem to give a single, and we'll leave it at that. If you want to check us out for more content, you can find us over on YouTube at Web Warrior Protocols. We're also on Facebook and Instagram under the same name. John, you can be found lurking in all of these places, as Will would say, from House Party Protocols. So big shout out to him as well, as without him, I don't think I'd have ever ended up doing a podcast. Ron, where can people find you if they want to message you, or would you rather remain an enigma at this point, as I know you've been getting absolutely hailed since your win with the Inhumans?
The best place to get a hold of me is probably on Discord or Facebook Messenger, or I don't know, some MCP related chat somewhere. I'm sure I'll be there and people can find me if they want to talk Inhumans, which I've already had a ridiculous amount of messages about.
And I just think it's worth mentioning, it's not just Inhumans that you play, is it, Ron? You take something different to every single event.
Yeah, so I think I have now played, other than Weapon X, because they're still fairly new, I've played every affiliation at a competitive event so far.
Awesome. So people can message you for questions for pretty much any affiliation, really, Ron. Not to put you on the spot there, but you are my go-to as well if I need roster advice. So you can find Ron in the Savage Lands Discord, which is run by myself and Rich Mid. Mainly by Rich Mid. I won't take the credit away from him at all there, as I always seem to be too busy trying to juggle exploding computers and the likes. That is everything from us all today. John, thank you for joining me.
Absolute pleasure, mate.
And Ron, thank you for coming on as a guest on our first episode.
No worries, dude. I look forward to listening to the rest of the episodes when you get them up and running.
And then a big shout out to Boarding Brum, who are our sponsors, and Deep Cut Studios, who you can check out for a gaming mat. That is all for now, and we will see you guys next time. So, guys, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. As always, I want to say a massive thank you to all the supporters of the channel, and especially to those that are the channel's patrons. You guys have made everything possible, and it's thanks to you guys that we're able to buy all the equipment that we need, the train and the mats, and everything that we needed to get built up to what we are today. If you're interested in becoming a patron, then you can join us with the link down below in the description. And once again, thank you for watching.